The history of the Berkeley Chinese Community Church, United Church of Christ, dates back to February 1900, when the first Chinese mission school was established in the basement of the First Congregational Church of Berkeley. In 1901, the mission moved to a cottage at 1946 Shattuck Avenue, between University Avenue and Berkeley Way. This cottage provided living quarters and various meeting rooms. At this time, the Chinese mission officially came under the supervision of the California Chinese Mission that was led by Dr. William Pond, with support from the American Missionary Association. In 1905, the lot on Shattuck Avenue was sold. The building was moved to 1917 Addison Street and raised up to become the second floor. The building provided additional living quarters, a kitchen, a dining room and bath, and a large meeting room where English classes and Chinese education programs flourished. The mission was dedicated to serve the needs of students from China in studying at the University of California and to teach English to Chinese immigrants. In 1908, Y.T. Dang was appointed assistant pastor and missionary helper to the Berkeley Chinese Mission. In 1909, a decision was made to organize as a branch church. In 1910, the branch church was organized with North Berkeley Congregational Church as mother church. It was hoped that with the blessing of God, the branch church would become an independent church. When Y.T. Dang left in 1912 to go to California, B.C. Wong, then a student at University of California, became lay pastor. Under his leadership, the branch church became a self-sustaining, independent congregation on December 15, 1914. From this day, the church flourished and grew. Sunday services were held. A Christian education program was launched. A Chinese literary club was started, as well as a Chinese Christian association. The young men in the congregation enjoyed basketball as one of their activities. Dr. B.C. Wong served as part-time lay pastor for the church for 30 years until 1942. Mr. Dan Yee and Reverend Y.S. Tom served as pastoral workers until 1942. As the years passed, the church became the center of social and cultural life for Chinese residents of Berkeley and for Chinese students of the university. As families with children were drawn into the church, the Chinese language school, which was started in 1914, continued to teach American-born Chinese the language of their forefathers. Ironically, this mission, which was started to teach English to Chinese students, found itself called to teach Chinese to second-generation Chinese Americans. In 1953, the church voted to change its name from Berkeley Chinese Congregational Church to Berkeley Chinese Community Church to reflect its ecumenism. In August of this year, 1953, the Reverend David Tao Yun Wan was installed as the church's first full-time ordained pastor. Leaving after church service at 1917 Addison Street, you see Reverend David Wen greeting people. There is Edward G. Behind him, Stanton Fu. Mrs. Sue Chong. And can you identify other?
In those days, after you get into Cal, you have to find a place to live because I was born and raised up in the Sacramento Valley. And places, even if you see a for rent sign or whatnot, you go to the door. A lot of people, they see who you are, they won't open the door, or else they say, well, the place has been rented, or they're just not interested. And the church at 1917 Addison had rooms in back of the church upstairs, and there were quite a few students from overseas that were living there. And then when I heard about it, I applied, and they were very nice to let me in. And in those days, it was right after the Depression, and of course, for one thing, we couldn't afford very much. You have to remember that compared to the price today, the university only charged $27.50 for a semester. And in fact, by living at the church, my first year at Cal, the total expenses was less than $250. So, without that help, it would have been very, very difficult to keep going at Cal. And of course, much resources. I remember at one meeting that was held, and at that time we were thinking about establishing a new church, and our total resources for the building fund at that time was somewhere around $1,300 to $1,400. And at that time we were thinking about, we ought to have a church of our own, So, and then the other unusual thing was when I was up at Cal and filling out all the papers, you had to put down your phone number. The church was only charging us, I think, $4.50 a month for rent. And there was two of us staying in that room there. So I guess, and then there was a kitchen facilities right outside our room, downstairs. There was a kitchen, and so everybody, was able to cook there. There was a stove, and every time we took a shower, I think we had to light up the boiler. To heat up the water, because that was. And then after you finish your shower, you shut it off, because otherwise the church right now, we need the outside of it. I remember a whole bunch of us, Mr. Boy, and managed to get hold of all the ladders and the equipment, and we were painting it. And I think Mr. G. Mr. G. now in Texas, was also involved. Ray Lou was staying next door to us. He comes to the senior center every so often now. And, some of the people I remember, John G. and Winky Lou still comes to our senior center. It was a very nice group of people, but the church attendance in those days, there weren't really that many. And then, of course, they also had a Chinese school running at the same time.
1939年我畢業，1941年我畢業，咁我嚟呢個 church 咧，我識得咧。BC Wong 得到 BC Wong、Henry Poi、Su Chong， 又 Tunji， 又後來咧 Ivan Wong， 最後咧1947年咧，我嚟呢處禮拜堂聚集，我識得到好，就喺呢個禮拜堂咧就居住，就喺加州大學咧讀書，咁咧喺呢個禮拜堂住咗幾年，就認識好多教友，有好多留學生喺度崇拜，咁後來咧我搬咗大埔之後咧10幾年之後又翻嚟呢個禮拜堂聚集， 就咧一直至到而家，我好喜歡翻嚟呢個禮拜堂侍奉受主崇拜。在呢個禮拜堂咧，認識好多人，好多留學生，好多咧舊時嘅教友、舊時嘅同學，咁我十分歡喜翻嚟呢處。
Coming to church in 1939, and we moved from Nogales, Arizona, and we moved to Berkeley, and well, actually we moved from Arizona in 1937, thinking that we would go to China, and then when we got here, the Japanese invaded China, and so we, my father decided that it would be best not to go to China, but he wanted us to go to China to learn the language, learn the history, and to go to Chinese school there. And so then with the war, because of the war, he decided that, well, let's find some property in Berkeley, so that it's a university town, and once we established residence there, then as we grew up, we could go to the university there, and that's why we, moved to Berkeley. And my father built a two-story building, a store in the bottom, and we lived upstairs. And but because he was not a citizen, he was a resident, he could not buy the property because it was against the law to sell to foreigners. But he put the property in my brother's name, all three boys' name, and so that was how we came to Berkeley. And then because he wanted us to learn Chinese, he found that there was a Chinese church in Berkeley that had a Chinese school, and so then we started going to school. And we lived on San Pablo Avenue, and we would walk all the way up to Addison, which is about 20 blocks, every day after school, or we would get out of American school at 3 o'clock. Then we'd walk to Chinese school, starts at 4 o'clock to about 6 o'clock, and then we would walk home.
I've been with the church for a long time. My family moved over from San Francisco to Berkeley in 1933. I was 7 years old at that time. About a year or so after that, my parents found out that there was a Chinese school being held at the Berkeley Chinese Congregational Church on Addison Street in Berkeley. So they sent the three oldest of our family to attend Chinese school. The Reverend T.T. Tom was a Chinese school teacher at that time. He's a one teacher in one room teaching many classes. Of course, he was the pastor of our church also, so he encouraged all of us to attend Sunday school. So that's how I got started attending the church, attending the Sunday school. And I remember that the first people that we met there at the church were people like York Jew and his brothers Wing To Jew, or Tony Jew, as he was called, and his younger brother Wing Git, or Teen, as he was called, and older sister Rimi. They were very, very active in the church at that time. As a matter of fact, they used to help pick us up sometimes to go to Sunday school. And then there were people like Dr. B.C. Wong, who was a lay pastor of our church for many years, off and on. As a matter of fact, our present church building was dedicated to Dr. B.C. Wong. Dr. B.C. Wong was a lay pastor. His profession was a mathematics professor at the University of California at Berkeley. And his wife, Mrs. Mom, and daughters, Carolyn and Helen. And the daughters were active in helping to teach Sunday school. And other people, Tang Chi, Ding Wong, Chan Ji, a number of people. And the Lee brothers, Chong and Roger Lee, and their cousins Jake and George Lee. The Lee brothers were, along with Carolyn, I think, were in charge of the Christmas program. With this first year that I was there, they enlisted my brother and I, my brother Alan and I, and another friend Ying to participate in the Christmas program. So the three of us dressed up as the wise men, and we sang "We Three Kings of Orient." This sort of was the beginning of our joint singing at the church. It eventually led my brother Alan and I to sing in the church choir. So we've sung in the choir for many, many years. Sunday school at that time was the facilities for Sunday school, that is, was very inadequate. The church building on Addison Street just had a small room for the sanctuary, and then behind the sanctuary was one small meeting room. That was the only Sunday school room in the whole church. So when we had Sunday school, classes were held in the sanctuary, in the vestibule, and the boys' class, which Alan, my brother Alan and I were part of, we met in the teacher's car every Sunday. So we had classes in the car every Sunday. As a matter of fact, in 1941, when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, we first found out about that when we were sitting in class in our teacher's car. And after the war started, many of the boys at the church enlisted either enlisted or drafted into the armed services. As for myself, I was a little younger then, but by the time I was 18, I also was drafted into the Army. And I served 2 years in the U.S. Army. After the war, I came back, and a lot of the boys came back from the service. And together we and a number of newcomers to the community, like Bob and Papu and his brother Frank, we reactivated the old Berkeley Chinese Athletic Club. This club had existed at the church for many years and was not active during the war years. But after the war, we reactivated it. And we primarily played basketball. We played basketball in the church league, and we played against other Chinese teams in the Bay Area, also teams in Stockton, Sacramento, and even Los Angeles. And we used to...
I usually go by the name of York Jew. My wife is Dorothy Jew. And I lived by the old church for about 25 years. So I knew all the adults that lived there, and they were very good people, and they were a good influence on me. And our lay pastor was Bing Chin Wong, and I understand that he was a houseboy in Santa Barbara, and his employers found out that he was such a brilliant person that they encouraged him to go to college, and he graduated from UC Berkeley, and finally became a college mathematics professor there. And during the Sundays, he would come down to the old church at 1917 Addison Street, and he performed the sermons. And he was a very impressive speaker. He was a good philosopher, and he knew people. It was like he was one of us, and that's how it was. We got too big for the old church, and I believe they had thoughts of selling their properties. Beverly and my sister Mimi had rights to this present church site, and when they heard that the church needed some land, they relinquished their right to the property. They had big thoughts. They thought they were going to build like 4 apartments there for the whole family, and with the 2 tennis courts, it would be just a perfect site for recreation.
We are younger people. I never go to Cal. I don't go to Cal. And we just go there, and we come from China, and we have no place to go, and so we come to the church. And there's a room, and we rent it out, $4 a room, and $2 to each person, Winky and I. And we rent it out for many years. The new building, I had the business here in 1946, and I go by on Afton Street. Every day I look at the building. I said, I hope they're gonna be sold. So finally they put outside for sale. So I told Henry Boy, I said, a lot is for sale. I want to buy it. So I want to build 4 houses and 2 tennis courts and a bed. And the Jew family gonna be there. We have 4 houses, so they can play tennis all day, all night. So we paid down payment $300. So Henry Boy, you take the $300 to put down payment for buy the lot, and cost about $13,000. I didn't tell the price. I didn't ask for low the price, nothing. I just buy it. And then finally, when the church, they said they need a new place. The church have to be want to move and buy a bigger place. I said, you look all over, Henry, see you can find another place like this. It's 175 wide and 200 feet deep. I said, good enough for us to build 4 houses and say the tennis court. And if the church want it, you can have it. You give me back $300 deposit, that's it. Or sometime when I have time, I take my movie camera and take the picture of them, what they're doing. The first thing, I take an empty lot and see everything, and then I see them build, I see everything, how they're going. So I've been doing almost every month, take a picture of it.
Roger Lee was chosen as the architect for the new church building on Acton Street. The building contractor was Peter Mattei Construction Company, who had submitted the low bid of $54,872. The groundbreaking ceremonies for our new church were held on January 9, 1955 at 12:30 p.m. The ceremony was conducted by Reverend Wynne. Mr. Edward Lowe, chair of the church council, spoke briefly on the importance of the occasion. The architect, Roger Lee, and the contractor, Peter Mattei, were introduced to the congregation. Then Mr. Lowe and Mrs. Henry Poy, chairman of the Board of Trustees, broke ground by turning the first shovelful of earth. As the construction got underway, a subsurface drainage condition was discovered. A drainage ditch had to be dug, and the manpower of our young adults and physically able members was used to dig the trench for the drain, and this saved the church $5,000 in extra labor costs. We received a $15,000 loan and a $2,000 grant from the Board of Home Missions of the Congregational Church through the assistance of the Reverend Dr. William Pratt, Congregational Conference Minister. The title of the property at 1917 Addison Street was held by the California Northern Conference of the Congregational Church, who were willing to sell the property on our behalf and give us the monies from the sales, $17,000, with the condition that our new deed state that a house of worship would be erected on the property, and we will continue to use the property for such purposes only, and that this house of worship shall continue to be an evangelical church in fellowship with Congregational and or Christian Association, recognized by the General Council of the Congregational Christian Churches in the United States. Another condition of our loan was that we had to make changes to our plans as recommended by the New York Church Building Society. One such change you will see in the picture, where the building in the front was to have 4 large colored glass windows framed with wood to give a cross effect in the front of the building facing the street. This design was vetoed, and it was recommended that we wall up the window. It was decided to put a mosaic pattern panel in front with a cross on it on the outside wall, and wood panel on the inside. The cost of this change was paid for by Mrs. Tang and Theodore Tang in memory of Mr. Harry Tang. There is a plaque outside indicating who is honored by this memorial. Here the brick wall is being put up. The laying of the cornerstone ceremony was held on Monday, May 30, 1955 at 2:30 p.m. A special worship service was held with the following ministers participating in the service: Reverend B.Y. Lang, the San Francisco Chinese Congregational Church Minister Emeritus; the Reverend Joseph Ma, pastor of the San Francisco Chinese Congregational Church; Reverend Wilston Word, pastor of North Berkeley Congregational Church; Dr. Vera Loper, pastor of the First Congregational Church; Dr. Stuart Anderson, president of Pacific School of Religion; Dr. William Pratt, conference minister; and Reverend David Wynne. There is York and Dorothy Jew and their oldest child. Services were held in the unfinished building. and then we exited to the front of the building for the laying of the cornerstone. A copper metal box was sealed in the cornerstone. Placed in the box was a list of church members, an English Bible, a Chinese Bible, the latest copy of the Etc., the church newsletter, campaign fundraising pamphlets, and newspaper clippings. Do you recognize any of the faces attending this service? There is the choir. There is Mrs. Henry Poi, Bessie as we call her fondly. Mrs. Poi was the chairman of the Board of Trustees. Do you recognize any faces? There's Loie Wong, Peter Hong, Joseph Ma, Reverend Joseph Ma, Reverend B.Y. Lang, Richard Wong, Leslie Hong, the cornerstone indicates 1955. Notice that the bubbles were only put on the roof where it was indoors. Here is where the mosaic panel was placed in the front of the building. Church when Mrs. Bessie Poi one of the deacons came to visit my parents at our grocery store when we first moved to Berkeley. She explained about the Chinese school and invited my parents to send us to Chinese school. So we came to know the church through the Chinese school. It was we went to Chinese school after American school from 4 to 6 every day, and we used to live on San Pablo Avenue, and the church was, and the Chinese school was at 1917 Addison Street, and we would walk up after the American school, go to Chinese school, walk home, then we'd have dinner after we got home. We went to school Monday to Friday. It was through going to Chinese school that we were invited to come to Sunday school, because the pastor was the Chinese school teacher. And that's how we were exposed to the church. This was about 1942, 43. And one of the things that was very important to my family is the pastor and his wife at that time, the Reverend Ivan Y. Wong, were, when my father died in 1943, they were a big help to my mother. They helped her by taking her to the doctor and doing all sorts of things to help her. So I always remember the service that they gave us as an important part of what I learned that Christians should be doing to reach out to other people. We came to Sunday school, and we were involved in the Sunday school program. And in 1946, their church council invited me to become pianist for church, because the pianist had gotten married and had left the area. And I've been involved with the choir or the music of the church in some way since that time. I played off and on all the way through till 1955 as pianist. And then when we moved to this building here, Eva Lynn May was invited to become the organist. And I took lessons from her and acted as substitute organist till her retirement. And I was supposed to be interim organist. Still am interim organist until they find a full-time organist that's willing to serve. I served as Sunday school teacher, Vacation Bible School superintendent. That I was also the newsletter editor at that time. I was active in the building committee, especially I was on the building committee that built our current facilities, the sanctuary and parish hall building. It was supposed to be a larger building, but we didn't have sufficient money, so we had to cut down the size so that we wouldn't have to pay out the mortgage that get us such a large mortgage, and try to keep it within our ability to pay and to raise money. I joined the church in 1953 when the pastor at that time, Reverend David Nguyen, said to me that I really needed to affirm my faith in public to be meaningful. True that I was doing things that all the members did or were not doing. I was doing more things than the members were doing and serving the church at that time. And I thought there was no need for me to join the church. But he said, until you make that public confession, it did not mean anything. And so I was baptized in 1953 by Reverend Nguyen, and I became a member of the church at that time. One of the things that stand in my mind is that when I was playing the piano in the 49, 50s, there used to be only 5 persons attending church, and Dr. Ho was the preacher, was the minister at that time, and I was playing the piano, and he had bilingual services, and I thought, why are we still having, bilingual translation, bilingual exact repetition of the sermon when there was only 5 people and they all understood English. And so at that point in time, the church council decided that they were going to investigate the possibility of joining with First Congregational Church in Berkeley, and they sent out a committee to go speak to the Dr. Reverend Beer Loper, and First Congregational Church was open that we could be an independent church or we could merge with them. But the congregation and the council decided no, they wanted to stay a Chinese church and be independent of anybody else. And after they made that decision is when they went to call the Reverend David Wynn, who's our first full-time pastor. And through his ministry, we were able to complete the building of this church, the facilities. And during his time, we had a tremendous program. And we had, so many youngsters in Sunday school, over 100. There was no room for Sunday school classes. And then we thought we had to build a educational building. And by 1961, that was completed and built. And I thought it was that Reverend Wynn's ministry was very significant in this church. And I'm sorry that when he left, that he left because he had done much to help this church grow. This is the lot where our old building used to be. This was 1917 Addison Street. Now a building that has a lot of shops and a restaurant in it. Was a 2-story building. The first floor was had the large room for worship services, kitchen in the back, and a bathroom and a shower. Upstairs were dormitory rooms, an apartment for the pastor. The lot was originally bought for $3,000 in 1905, I believe, and we sold it for $17,000 when we moved to the new building, and the sale of the lot helped to pay the cost of the new building. Opening worship services at 2117 Acton Street were held on September 18, 1955. Not all of the furnishings were completed. 15 pews had to be ordered by the church planning committee at the cost of $100 each. Drapes and carpet had to be installed. The chapel had a sitting capacity of 125 persons. By opening the wood folding partitions, a total capacity of 400 could be obtained. The building was further divided into numerous Sunday school rooms, a stage, a nursery, a large kitchen, and storage rooms. In addition to the building, there is a multipurpose outdoor court for for such activities as volleyball, basketball, badminton, teenage activities, carnivals, and other community gatherings. There was off-street parking for 40 cars. You can see that the landscape had not been put in as yet. Eventually, the landscaping was done by Homer Lee, with muscle power provided by the men of the church to dig up the dirt to install the sprinkler system for the lawn. Do you recognize any of these faces? After dedication services, a potluck lunch was served. The person in charge was Ellen Fong, who you see in her dark dress and a white pinafore apron. There's Henry Poy and Harding Learn discussing business. Do you recognize any of these folks? Oh yes, there's Florence G. Tom coming with, there she is, in her polka dot two-piece outfit. There's Mrs. Ingman Nam. The women's skill in the kitchen, preparing dinner at the dedication service. There's Florence G. and other women's from the women's skill. This dinner and program was held on Friday evening, April 27, 1956. Isabel Jong. Then the young adults and youth were helping to serve. Marion. Lenny Warren. My brother Jack. Do you recognize any of these folks enjoying their dinner? Friends from the First Congregational Church or North Congregational Church. Chengji and
wasn't any Sunday school per se, so being a little crazy, I think at that time, I was only in my 40s, the pastor was living upstairs in one room by himself. And so I went up there one time and knocked on his door. I think he was shocked to see a married woman come knocking on his door. And I told him that I'd be willing to help if he needed some help to start a Sunday school, something like that. Anyway, I think he was shocked. And so he just made an arrangement to come and see me. And so anyway, I knew few of the members, 2-3 of the members in the church at that time. The choir, you know, some of the choir members are still the same choirs that's singing in the choir. So you can talk about dedicated people. Those are the ones. And Rosalie being foremost among them, and Lily. And so I got some of them teaching Sunday school, and then met some parents and some ladies who had children, and they brought the children to Sunday school. So we had a Sunday school, but next thing I knew, I was superintendent, and I had to recruit 2 teachers too, and so quite a few of them surprisingly were willing to try. In those days, mothers didn't all have to go to work like they do nowadays. And besides that, there were many more children in the families in those days than there are now. Now there's only 1 child or 2 at the most. And so we had quite a few. And then I had got to know some of the children in the Sunday school, how some of them could really play the piano. So we had quite a few, like the Nip family, Grace, Daisy Nip, who used to be a member of ours, and 2 of her kids were very, very dedicated. Every Sunday morning, they were right there to play for Sunday school. So we had a Sunday school going, and then they started to build the new church we're using now. And some of the old timers in helping to build that church is still with us today. And so that's almost 50 years ago. And so we owe a big debt to these people. And Teng Ji and his wife, who are now living in Texas with their son, Andy, and then like the Wong sisters, like Rose and Lily, and the Chin sisters, like Dorothy and Mabel, and let's see, and then Harding and Dorothy Leung, and Milton and Jenny Louie. Oh, Jenny wasn't active in the church at that time, but Milton was. And any number of them, I think you people probably know who they are. And they really are dedicated. And so from there we had, let's see, at one time we had over 100 kids in Sunday school. And we had classes in the office, on the choir loft, in the kitchen, and in the, let's see, at that time we didn't have the new building, which is the educational building. Let's see, we had 2-3 classes in the social hall, and which was kind of disturbing. So I started building some bookcases. Come to think, I'm kind of crazy, I think, because we didn't have any tables or anything. So I started building tables
and I bought 4x8 plywood boards and made tables for the classes. I think I made about 6 tables. and then I built some bookshelves with the cabinets underneath. I think, in fact, we still have one of them in one of the Sunday school rooms in the back there. And so we had used those as dividers for the classes in the Sunday school, in the main social hall. So they act as classes dividers. And
So I tell, and my family is a Christian family. So when I met Francis in the American Air Force, that time I was Air Force nurse. And after we started to go around together, he been tell me about the church over here in Berkeley, and she showed me some card that the people send him when he go overseas. And also when we got married in Shanghai, people send him the wedding card. So I know practically quite a few names in the church. And like Rose Wong's name is in the card, and Mrs. Poy's name in the card, and so many others that is not in the church now, but I know the name. So when I came over in 1947, after we settled down in Delta area, because Francis' parents in the farm have an orchard pear farm. So we lived there for Francis waiting for discharge from the army, from the Air Force. So during that time, I had the first baby, Andy, and we didn't come out yet. So after Francis discharged from the Air Force, then we come to Berkeley, look for a house. He always wanted to live in Berkeley, and he wanted to go to all the Cal game too. Mm-hmm. So we came back. So to when we settled in Berkeley, Francis, the first thing that took me to the church. So I like the church, like a small family. So ever since I've been joining the church, that's at home, because all the church friendly people are very friendly. And up to that, we've been in the church for a long time. My first 2 children was born in the Air Force, so we baptized by the Air Force chaplain. And the third girl was baptized in our old church by the conference minister. I think it's Dr. Pratt or somebody that came, and that time it's Dr. Hall as the minister. That's how I joined the church.
And I started to come to the church in 1954. My daughter, my husband, and I all came to the church around the same time. It was around Mother's Day in '54 that we became members of the church. At that time, the Mr. and Mrs. Club had just formed a year before we joined. So we were not charter members, but we were in the first year. My daughter was going to Sunday school with her Auntie Mabel. So it wasn't until after that they said that Adrian's father was going to come to Mother was coming to church. And they said, oh, her mother comes to church. They said, no, that's not her mother, that's her auntie. So then we decided to come to church, my husband and I. So between the 3 of us, we all joined the church at that time. We were active in the 3M Club and in the church. That's when the church was located on Addison Street. And it was a year later that they did have the groundbreaking and the corner stone laying at the Acton Street address. We were all active in recruiting and fundraising for the building of the new church. My husband was the chairman of the fundraising committee for the parsonage, and it's on the record that the architect and the Sunday school teacher and the pastor were active in the building of the parsonage. There was a picture that was recently circulated showing these people that were instrumental in seeing that the parsonage was built.
We have been coming to church since our marriage, and I have myself, since Bernice is from Los Angeles, I myself have been to church in the 40s, while I was still in high school, or when I was in college in the 50s, or after I graduated from college in the 50s. Then I started meeting a lot of other people like George Wong, Sherman Lee, and so on. And we have a big group of people there, or mostly we call it young people's group. The young people group take care of the church in everything. We were the backbone of the church, so-called. And then we have Dr. Ho as a minister. And they would want. But after church, normally we go out for lunch. As a leader of the group, we ourselves must donate certain amount of money in order to have a kickoff. And so we went to different business, different company, and restaurants that have children going to Sunday school. And we asked for donation. But anyway, we didn't know we could make it in those days because we don't have enough resources. So what we have is a faith, because we know that eventually everything will be all right if you trust in the Lord. And then it came out okay. In fact, we paid out our mortgage ahead of time. And then Mr. Tang Ji burned the mortgage. We have a big celebration in burning of the mortgage. And you can see it at the picture at the church that I have a collage of pictures at the church.
I didn't enter the picture till after marriage, and then the first 2 years I was home, and then when the children, when Cedric was a little bit older, we started coming to Sunday school. And so we've been kind of on and off active since then. And then when our children grew up, then they all attended Sunday school and church activities. And so so that's, I would say that's like about 40 years ago or so. And we're still trying to make
Chinese Community Church. And I've been coming to the church since 1947, when we came to California from Colorado after I graduated from high school. And one of the first people I met was Lily Wong, and she invited me to church. And since I didn't really know anyone in the area, it was a good opportunity for me to meet young people. So I had started attending the church, and the youth group was very strong at the time. There was the boys basketball, in which my brother played on one of the teams, and then there was a youth fellowship that we got together and did social things and educational things, and so it was a fun time, and I stayed until 1955 when I married and moved to Tucson, Arizona. In 1960, I returned from Tucson with my husband, Sonny, and my son, Doug, and we started coming back to church, and we've been at church ever since. It was a good church. It filled a need, and it provided us much spiritual food, and also most of our friends come from the church. So for me, it has been a very good experience, and people ask why I've stayed for so long, and I really can't pinpoint why. I just cannot see why not. So consequently, I've been at the church for a long time, and I've seen it go through many good times and bad times and challenging times, and we have survived them all. Soon to celebrate our 100th anniversary. So it's been a good experience. I never have belonged to another church, so I really can't compare it. But I know that I love the church, I love the people, and I can't see myself anyplace else.
我喺香港合一堂，就張佑文先生咧，就有日就嚟合一堂揾我，佢喺處見到禮拜堂有好多人喺處聚集，所以咧後來佢就同我講，嗰啲能嚟美國Berkeley 嚟做牧師啊咁啊，我就話我而家啲處都係咁多人喺處又做開，點能夠行開咧？佢就話唔係啊，啲樹教會咧都好需要人，你都係傳福音，不過咧都係嚟美國傳福音啦咁啊，所以咧就係我同太太咧商量，所以咧就將來咧就佢就寄咗個聘書，同埋咧係船費，咁我哋搭船嚟嘅，唔係搭飛機啊，因為我哋行李有好多，有細佬哥，有4個細佬哥，所以我就係咧就1963年咧就夏天就坐船嚟美國。
嗰陣時我哋嚟呢就好高興喎，一嚟到呢全體嗰啲教友呢就去船個碼頭接我哋，一人一件行李，30幾件行李即刻就搬咗翻嚟禮拜堂，咁呢就喺而家呢個牧師樓嗰度住，咁我哋就好開心一個新環境，但係呢嗰陣時有機會見到好多新嘅朋友。
咁我哋嚟咗之後咧，除咗禮拜堂嘅工作咧，就係有中文學校。中文學校咧就我太太我都係教書，另外個女咧都喺處教書， 咁啊當時係中文學校嘅就有好多學生，仲有咧我哋有童子軍，童子軍咧有初級有高級，咁啊童子軍咧就係得到好多獎品，有好多嘅，因為我哋有中文學校同埋童子軍咧，嗰啲家長咧佢唔係學校嘅，唔係呢個教會嘅家長，但係佢哋因為喺童子軍同埋喺中文學校，佢哋參加中工作，所以我哋每年咧係9月尾嗰個買物會啊，就撥沙，就當時咧好多人咧幫手嘅，咁我哋籌咗好多錢，因為好多唔係教友咧，佢都嚟幫忙，因為佢哋有童子軍，有中文學校咧，佢哋喺處參加，所以呢個咧係幫忙我哋嘅教會咧好大嘅。
我哋喺呢度咧就做咗18年
，18年係咯。
咁啊，證明咧就預備退休，咁啊我哋就一齊退休，所以咧喺嗰陣時我哋就仍然都係喺教會離開咗一個少半年，然後又翻嚟教會，尤其咧教會又好有心，又特別俾證明又榮休牧師即係特別咧呢個退休嘅時候咧，佢又教會送咗呢一本書，係特別每一個家庭就有一頁，佢哋嗱好似呢度咁，你睇，咁如果你慢慢睇咧，你就可以睇到你舊時，尤其而家好多家庭睇到佢哋舊時10幾年前嘅相，呢度咧都好詳細可以睇到嘅。
Under 1984, under the sponsorship of the Chinese Heritage Church in Hong Kong. My assignment was to complete my internship with them, and I remember at that time I met quite a few people who stepped out of BCCC for a little while and came worshiping. I remember Walter and Christina Lai, Dr. Robert Wong and his wife May, Hui Wing-gay and Connie, Sally Lau. On and off, I also saw Bill and Ruby Wong and certainly May Wong, who came to our prayer and Bible study group. I guess they must be the people who went back to Berkeley and told the congregation about me and said, hey, you know, out in Richmond, there's this young bilingual pastor from Hong Kong with his multi-talented, beautiful wife Ivy. Now make sure you tell her that I said this, okay? They said that there's this young guy out there and maybe you folks might want to check him out. And so one Sunday, Francis John and Sunny Lo came visiting. I remember that Sunday very well. They came late and they left before the offertory. Later on, I joked with Francis in Berkeley. I said, why did you leave before the offertory? And he said, well, we came to hear you preach. We didn't go to give money to the church. Typical Francis. But anyway, that Sunday, I happened to preach in Cantonese. And Sonny, having the foggiest. But he did like me. And the church extended an invitation for me to come and preach at BCCC. And I guess the rest is history. I was a pastor at Berkeley Chinese Community Church in the years 1984 through 1995. If you are to look at the life cycle of a church undisturbed, it will look like a bell curve. And I believe the church at that time was on the upswing of that bell curve, on the incline, so to speak. There are three reasons why we were growing. First of all, the Reverend Bill Livingston really paved the way for us to grow. And of course, I have my dynamic duo partner, our Minister of Music, Eva Lin May, who did her thing so well with us and really inspired us with her music and the choir. And last of all, we have the support and guidance of our Pastor Emeritus, Reverend Lei Jingming. Berkeley Church during those years underwent a lot of change. Physically, we changed. I mean, we had a new parking lot and the barbecue patio, children's playground, the rose garden, street front landscaping and gate on the outside. And of course, on the inside of the building, we added stained glass panels and padded pews and new lighting and sound system, space partitions, and last but not least, our beautiful conference room that's on the stage. Of course, the kitchen was later added on after I left. But all in all, it was really a time of change, a time of advancement. Spiritually, I mean, the word was preached, sacraments administered, and certainly we all got closer to the Lord. In terms of our worship attendance, we grew from an average of 100 on a Sunday morning back in 1984 to averaging 160 constantly every Sunday. Of course, when we started 2 services Sunday morning by 1994, I would have guessed that we got close to 180 people every Sunday morning. Our Bible study and our Sunday school attendance went up. Our vacation Bible school was being held every year, supported by youth activities and young families activities. And our Mr. and Mrs. Club soon changed their name to 3M Fellowship. Back in 1993, I also remember Ivy and I helped out with the Cantonese Evangelical Fellowship at UC Berkeley. And we met many, many young and talented Christians, and they became a source of support for our Cantonese ministry in Berkeley. And of course, with a sudden influx of people from Hercules and Pinot, our Cantonese ministry just took off. It was really a time of fun and fellowship and following Jesus Christ. Celebration for us at Berkeley. I mean, so many weddings. I married off parents and their children, and quite a few young couples in the church. We had red egg and ginger parties galore, and there were birthdays and there were wedding anniversaries. I want you folks to know, I started to gain weight at that time, and it is all your fault. 5. I really believe that was also a time of doing ministry together, and I am so privileged to have so many of you folks walking together with me. I mean, there are just too many co-workers to mention, but we would all agree that Eva Lynn May really took on a huge part in our music ministry, and later on together with Christina Wong and Joy Wong. I mean, Dorothy Wong shouldered the senior center. Ellen Fong was synonymous with our clothes closet. Sunny Low is a person that I will always identify with cleanup, together with Paul Yook, who was really doing all our finances all those years. Then of course there's the Three Musketeers, George Chong and Morrison Chan and James Ju, who did all the repairs in the church, and the Aoyangs and the Hueys and the Mews, who really uplifted our young families ministry. Then later on we have Kovic and Sergi, Edmund and Julie, Mark and Betty, John and Johnny, and Helen, and many, many others who really got the Cantonese ministry going. So like I said, it was really a time of doing ministry together all those years, and certainly the Lord was pleased.
Something, I was elected the moderator of the church, and I recall that our interim pastor was Reverend William Livingston, and we would have weekly meetings, and it was at that time that we talked about starting a senior center. I told him that when I retired, I would be willing to start a senior center. I didn't know anything about how to run a senior center or what needed to be done, but I was willing to try it. So he thought that was a very good idea, and I decided to do some research on senior centers. And this was about 1985. So I checked our North Berkeley Senior Center. I checked the Chinese Presbyterian Church in Oakland, and I checked with another one in the area. And I talked to people in the different senior centers. But I knew that the way they ran their program was different than we should be running ours. So I used some points of each of the different senior centers to start and develop a program for our Berkeley Chinese Community Church Senior Center. And in May of this coming year, we will be 14 years old.
After we moved our church to our present building, we had a number of young couples at the church, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to start a young couple club, and we called this the Mr. and Mrs. Club, and that was back in 1954, 55. So that's 45 years ago, and this club is still going. It's never every year it's been operating as a club, primarily for educational and spiritual advancement, and to help the church in whatever way we can. And the Mrs. and Mrs. Club were usually the ones who sponsored the Thanksgiving luncheon to raise funds for the church. And also the Mrs. and Mrs. Club were the most active ones in putting on the church bazaar that we used to have, which is also a fundraiser for the church. So this is a club that's been operating for many years successfully, and about 10 years ago or so, we decided we'd change the name from Mr. and Mrs. Club to the 3M Fellowship. 3M meaning Mr., Mrs., and Ms., to allow for single people who are widows or widowers or just single people to also join us in our activities. So we've opened it up, and I think we've encouraged a lot of people to join us. So we've been very happy about that.
Soprano. Oh. Sometimes. I'm Richard Wong. I'm sometime a bass, sometime a tenor, but I don't know what I am most of the time when he was directing.
I'm George Chong, and I'm not sure what I sing.
I'm Alan Louis. They could call me a bass.
I'm Mabel Lowell, a member of this wonderful alto section. I'm Sally Lau. I just joined the choir. I still new.
I'm Rose Lee. I try to sing alto. I'm Jenny Louie, still breathless as usual from running.
I'm Lily Wong, and I'm in the soprano section.
I'm Dorothy Wong, and I sing soprano.
Here received George Tang's call. He called me over the phone, and he said he's a pastor and he's looking for a piano teacher for his daughter, and that's how I came to know him, and he led me to the church he served, and since then I've been coming to this church. And I serve right now I'm serving as the chancel choir music director. In the past I helped organize children choir, and just try to serve in my capacity in the music area. I love to serve the Lord in the area of music simply because I believe I was called to serve Him in this area. When I was in college, I remember when I first applied the music school back in Indiana, and my first application was turned down because there was no more room for new students. And so I was very upset, and I prayed immediately to the Lord, and I asked the Lord to help me to get in the music department, and if that would come true, then I would serve the Lord in the rest of my life in this area. And very strangely, the next day I went to see the dean of the school, and got admitted for the next semester, for the second semester. So, and I was overjoyed by such a miracle, and I knew that God really wanted me to serve Him in the music area. So I did up to today. In every church I went to, I've been helping to set up the choir, to train the choir, and to serve.
Little 快脆就已經咧就嚟咗BCCC 呢間教會參加聚會啦。咁主要原因就因為咧嗰陣時咧黃牧師咧就同George 啦嗰陣時牧師係陳傑斌牧師啦，咁咧就係我哋以前都識佢嘅咁所以咧後尾我哋咧就嚟到呢個教會，咁咧亦都喺教會度聚會之後咧就覺得都即係好即係好開心啦，咁樣所以咧就留低咗繼續喺呢個教會度咯。咁嚟咗中文堂之後，咁就一路唔係當時唔係中文堂嘅，我嚟嗰陣時咧仲有中文堂，咁咧就有一個時間咧就係即係嗰時有廣東話團契啦，咁我哋有參加廣東話團契，咁後尾有一次咧就係嗰時廣東話團契都有一班人咧就係有個 group 咧唱詩嘅，咁咧就但係即係有啲特別嘅節目或者特別嘅嘢嗰時先會唱。咁有一次咧我就記得咧，我就參加一次特別嘅聚會，好似係請一位講員翻嚟講道嘅，係佈道會，咁咧佢哋咧就即係有人咧就即係有中文詩班，即係中文堂嘅有幾個咁樣組埋一齊做唱詩班，咁咧我就好中意，因為其實咧我自己喺香港咧好早咧就一路咧都係冇離開過詩班嘅工作嘅，咁咧就自己又中意唱啦，另外咧亦都係有帶領詩班，咁其實我好細個嗰陣時咧就好中意，即係好中意詩班㗎啦，即係好中意詩班呢一個事奉。咁不過咧就到10幾歲嗰時咧即係開始喺教會度咧，即係有參加詩班唱詩咧，即係做詩班員啦。咁咧係從來都冇斷過㗎喺香港。咁咧之後我讀 music 啦，咁所以咧又即係又帶嗰啲即係學校嘅 choir 咁樣啦。咁所以但係其實我自己就中意唱先多過指揮嘅。咁不過咧就嚟咗 BCCC 之後啦，咁跟住後尾我哋又開始有中文堂啦，咁就有中文詩班，咁我又即係參加啦。咁之後因為而家咧係有教會有需要啦，就需要揾一個中文堂嘅詩班指揮咁樣，咁就即係我都好樂意咧去即係多謝神咧俾我有呢個機會咧，就有呢個侍奉。
Organized, disciplined class, and they're walking through the Bible also. Let's meet this class.
Go away.
Isn't this a Cantonese class?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Right.
Chinese Cantonese Bible study.
Canada Bible 班啊，聖經班。
We are classmates. 我就係聖經班。
國兩關。
我就嚟黎明燈劉世權。
And the Robert T.K. Wong and Wang Tinku.
Me Wong. Sally Lau, my name.
You like the Bible class? You learn a lot.
Yes, the Cantonese Bible study. Classmate.
呢個係 George 啦。George Lee。
你出聲呀？
好啊。
Okay. My name is Betty Yu.
Class was taught Jim Wu and Joe Chi.
我係 Edmund 謝宇強。
哦 ，Godfrey 張紀律。
我係 Joseph 黃思祖。
我係 Stephen 謝超華。
我係 Josephine 潘桂平。
大家好，我係 Abby 胡明星。
我係 Elena 周瑞玉。
我係 Kate 陳少瓊。
我係 Sandy 何麗珍。
我係Jonathan 黃志成。
我係 Ricky 李偉基。
我係 Vivian 林黃秀芳。
我係胡慧君嘉德旺。
我係朱慧玲 Elaine Chu。
我係 Helen 林可倫。
我係 Jackie 林志強。
我係陳志威 Kovic。
OK。
咩啊？我叫 Jenny。中文名，中文名得啊。Betty 雅欣。
經理我係 William 李卓恒。
中文名，你知我講講啦。Vivian。中文名朱怡君。
I'm Pastor Rodney Yee of the Berkeley Chinese Community Church, and I've been pastoring at this church now since November of 1997. This church has been around for a long time, and I'm just happy to be a part of celebrating the 100th anniversary of this church since its founding. And what a joy it is to be a part of a church that is in this milestone in its church life. I'm really excited about this church and the potential that it has. It's been ministering with the Chinese community here in Berkeley for many years, and yet there's a lot of change that is going on in this Berkeley area. And so I'm hoping that the church in the future will continue its ministry with the Chinese people in the Berkeley area and areas around. But I also hope that we'll begin to build bridges with the other communities, the other faith traditions, so that we can truly be a church that is welcoming of all people and all races. That's my vision that I have for this church, that it can be a church that represents the Chinese community, that can build bridges with other communities of faith, that can be a Christian witness not only in this community but in the world. A church that outreaches to the Chinese people but goes beyond that and outreaching to all people in this community. And so that's my hope for this church, and I hope that the members will catch on to that vision, that they will see that together we can be a witness that can really bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to Chinese people and to all peoples of all ethnicities and nationalities and cultures as well. The Chinese Community Church is made up predominantly right now of many American-born Chinese who've been here for several generations, and I'm hoping that we can begin to bridge the generations and especially enable the newcomers, those people who are more recent to California, to begin to get involved in the church, to take on more leadership. This church is right now being run, being led more by the senior members of our church, and so I'm hoping that more and more young families the younger leaders will begin to feel the call and to accept their responsibility and make the commitments to being the future leaders of our church. We have many younger families who have that potential, and it's just a matter of encouraging them, of allowing and enabling them to begin to take the responsibility and to take that torch and take that baton and run that race and to continue the ministry that the older members have done for so many years. And so that's my hope for our church, that our younger families, our younger leaders will begin to feel that call and sense the commitment to becoming more involved and to take on the leadership of this church.
I'm the associate pastor of this church. My name is Edwin Meng. I've been serving in this church for almost 4 years, including 1 year on voluntary basis. As we are celebrating our 100 years anniversary, I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words. First of all, I would like to thank God for leading me to this church. He gives me a lot of learning opportunities, and also I have the privilege to work with Reverend Ronnie Yee and also other lay leaders in this church, and I'm very thankful and grateful for their support and also for the help in serving in this church. So I would like to take this chance, first of all, want to encourage each one of you to participate in this happy occasion. And also, I see there are many talented brothers and sisters in this church. I hope we can work together and then and also serve faithfully in this church. And then the following, I would like to say a few words in Cantonese. OK， 以下啦，我想講幾句説話啦，用廣東話。咁我好感謝神帶領我嚟到呢個教會，有好多嘅學習咁我以前都冇乜經驗啦，未牧過會啦，咁亦都係有好多嘅弟兄姊妹同埋牧師等等其他好多個牧師喺度幫助俾咗我好多嘅一啲嘅指引同埋一啲嘅提醒。咁我希望嚟緊100週年嘅時候，我哋繼續一齊努力去侍奉，咁盡用大家嘅恩賜。我哋當中有好多嘅恩賜嘅弟兄姊妹，咁特別我希望大家都係繼續喺呢個學習神嘅話語上高，更加努力，藉著讓神嘅話語去更加去建立我哋嘅生命，成為更加合佢用嘅器皿。